Welcome to the Redemptress Media Center and to yet another episode of Aging Gracefully, a talk show for evergreens. Well, we call it a talk show, but it actually is more than just a talk show, because those of you who have connected with this program have not stayed silent spectators or passive participants. In response to the show, so many of you have got in touch with us, either personally or through the RMC channels. We've had also other occasions to meet, especially at this meet, greet and share events that we've had in various cities and sometimes countries as well. And so this has been a time where more than just a talk show, we've been able to connect with you on so many different levels. So to help us unpack this new episode, I'm happy to have on our panel the A team of two doctors with their names beginning with A. Dr. Aishwarya and Dr. Angeliqueka. Dr. Aishwarya has been associated with the RMC in many different aspects in different fields. But today we are having her here today on this panel. And she comes with her background of medicine, which she studied both her MBBS as well as MD at Father Muller's Hospital in Kankanadi, Mangalore. And now she's the registrar in the Department of Medicine in the Baptist Hospital. We're happy to have you here, Aishwarya, to draw from your experience and expertise. We have Dr. Angeliqueka. I've introduced you second because you've been introduced many times before, because you have done so many episodes already on Aging Gracefully, as well as Heart Rock Cafe for the younger people. So your range is vast. Dr. Angeliqueka is a psychiatrist who did her medicine in India, but then her specialization in London, and she's been living there for 3 decades now, serving as a psychiatrist there. And therefore we have drawn on her in so many other episodes already of Aging Gracefully, and it's so wonderful to have you back.
Well, my pleasure.
And with the help of these two wonderful doctors to navigate the issue in this episode of Stronger Together, Your Mind Matters. When I was younger, I heard this phrase or statement: what is matter? Never mind. What is mind? Never matter. I mean, it seems like a conundrum. It seems like a riddle. What could it mean? There are many ways this has been interpreted. Sometimes there's the duality between the mind and the body, which is the matter. Or sometimes it's taking two aspects that are important realities, and how do we balance it? In the past, we've looked at the physical aspects of aging, but what about the mind? So it's so important, therefore, for us to look at this dimension of what we call strong together. Your mind matters. Again, there's a play on words. Your mind matters, and these matters of the mind are what we're going to look at. What is the background to it? We see that in the very first episode that we did was on loneliness and isolation. And as people live longer, their circle of family and friends of their same age group diminishes. So there's a sense of feeling isolated, lonely, sometimes even alienated. Sometimes we see that the loss of health and the loss of their independence also impacts them. Not just their body, but also their mind. At other circumstances, people get frail and weak, and they no longer have that prime place that they once had. And they feel left on the shelf, as it were. So these are situations that so many people are going through in their homes and families. And the others who don't enter into their world will say, why don't you get along with life and get along with it? We think that they're still 60 when they may now be 80, and how much that world has changed for them. So it is in looking at these aspects particularly, it will be worthwhile admitting that maybe somebody who is watching this event is going through situations like these. Sometimes you feel it's happening only to you and that my people don't understand me. But while this is a phenomenon, how do we deal with it? How do we address it? How do we face it? And therefore, it would be great to hear from you, Dr. Angeliqueka, how this can at least be talked about and addressed.
Sure, Father Juvi. I think you've mentioned a few salient points, but there are many other instances where people can feel isolated and lonely. Even earlier on in their retirement, if you like, immediately after retirement, they lose a purpose. They don't have enough to get up and do. Finances may be a problem. Interaction with the family may be a problem. So it's not just about physical health or mental health. It's also about the social structure around them. Quite often people retire and move to another place to be closer to family. So it's a new environment for them. They could have physical health issues, which, it could be diminished mobility, vision, hearing. All of this adds up as we get older in life. So loneliness at the moment, not just for the elderly though, for all age groups, has become an epidemic around the world. I think whilst social media is a wonderful thing on one hand, on the other hand, it's narrowing our world down because we don't need other people, or so we think. But interaction with other people, with other human beings, is crucially important. And loneliness has proved, research has proved that loneliness can have almost 33% increase in heart disease and other physical issues because of the rumination. You're on your own, you're sitting, you're thinking. It also affects the mind. A lot of people become depressed. They can become very anxious being on their own. So loneliness in its essence is quite pervasive. And the social isolation is one of the reasons. But looking at loneliness now with the elderly, I think bereavement is a big issue. Once you lose your spouse, you're on your own. The social circles that you belong to may not still be relevant. You don't have that interaction with that one special person every day. So bereavement is a big issue, especially in the elderly.
Thank you, Angeliqueka, for really setting the scene for some of these aspects that we have to navigate through this episode. Because this is where we touch the lives of people who are going through these events or experiences. Maybe you could add a few other dimensions that have come from your practice as a doctor as well.
In my practice, I have seen a lot of elderly patients who come with a lot of difficulty in sleeping at night. That has been a major problem. And they also find it difficult to interact with their family members after a point of time, especially now they've stopped working. And so because of that, they're always asking for medications to try to help them to sleep and to try to get them through the night, so that they wake up fresh in the morning and able to do their daily activities, at least whatever they're able to do at home. So this ends up taking a lot of medications such as antidepressants and hopefully hypnotics, and hoping that would help them sleep and solve all their other problems. So which is not really the solution to all of that.
Absolutely, because I'm sure you found in your practice as well that a dependence develops.
Yes.
So what works with one tablet, tomorrow they'll need two.
Yes.
And we're finding that more and more the elderly are getting into the realm of addictions. Yeah. So it could be that, you have one drink with dinner, and that becomes two drinks with dinner, and then it's a drink with lunch. And the loneliness, they try and fill in the gaps with substance misuse. So it could be medication at night, it could be a drink in the afternoon. And it's very insidious how it actually creeps up on them. And this is becoming quite an issue now because it's not something that's picked up, especially if they're living alone. And until they have a fall, or there's some memory problems, or there are issues with their physical health, people don't realize how much medication they're using. or alcohol for that matter, or tobacco, or whatever their choice of substance is. And that's closely linked with their sense of self-worth. Because I think for anyone who becomes dependent on a substance, you start losing your confidence. You start losing your ability to think, I'm worth something. And that's a huge emotive point for the elderly who are isolated and lonely, because you wake up in the morning and you think, nobody would even notice if I'm not here today. I don't matter to anybody. Yes, my family call, they'll visit once in a while, but if I wasn't here, nobody's life would change. And that's a huge emotional burden to carry, because you feel useless, you're worthless, you're not doing anything, you're not working, you're not helping family, you're just on your own. So the emotions that go with that can lead to a clinical depression. And I think we will be talking a little bit later on about the difference between normal elderly behaviors and when that flips into a clinical depression. So, for example, you mentioned sleep. It's very common and very normal, if you like. As you get older, you need less sleep because you're less active, both mentally and physically. But when does that become pathological? When does it become an issue where you're absolutely not sleeping? And quite often you'll find with the elderly, then day-night circle reverses. So because they can't sleep, they're up for quite a bit of the night, and then they're sleeping later in the day. That becomes an issue for family members if you're living with family, because they're up and about and they're going to work and they need to make sure your breakfast is done and all of that, and you're still sleeping. And then you wake up and the day is much longer and more lonely. So it becomes a vicious cycle. So that's when the addictions play in. But it can also lead to elder abuse. Elder abuse in its very essence is financial, physical, emotional, mental. So when you put yourself in a position where you don't have self-worth and you don't have the confidence, it invites almost, not intentionally, let's put it that way, family members to see you in that light, or friends to see you in that light. And again, that's just one layer on top of one layer of you feeling quite miserable. And that's when clinical depression sets in. So, yeah, you're absolutely right. There are physical issues like sleep, which become a pathology.
It's interesting listening to the two of you. We see how both the aspects, the physical aspects, a lack of sleep, but has its roots in probably a mental situation that is going on. Now, these are things that people undergo through in life. When do we realize that there is a need for a medical intervention? When do we realize that it's not just a passing thing or transient, but something that is really persistent and consistent? So when does it help to understand that intervention is needed and how that intervention can be done?
Yeah. So, Father Juvie, both those words are really pertinent. When you have symptoms that are pervasive, not fluctuating. So everyone has a bad day, especially, the elderly, if they're waking up and they're not feeling 100%, their mood will dip, but it comes back up again. But when you have symptoms that are pervasive and persistent, as you said, that's when you need to sit up and take note. Family need to think about it. So sleep, for example. You can have a couple of bad nights and then you have some medication and then, you kick yourself back into a routine. But when they have persistent, either sleeping too much or sleeping too little, that's an issue. Appetite, the loss of appetite, that's an issue. Lot of concentration, focus. The most important one is anhedonia, where you don't enjoy anything. They just don't have that joie de vivre. They don't want to get up and go anywhere. They don't want to interact. They don't want to have any kind of contact with people. That's when you know that now the chemicals in the brain are now starting to deplete, not because they're dementing, even though it can mimic dementia. And I think that's, for us, a diagnostic issue. Because when you're depressed, you don't concentrate. And when you don't concentrate, you don't remember. And when you don't remember, people might think, oh gosh, they're dementing, but they're not. They're not. It's purely because of this depressive picture and the symptoms they're going through.
Very often we come across patients in our practice who are perfectly well but have come just for their regular follow-ups, and who are very anxious and very fearful, and just want a reassurance from us that everything is okay, that we've checked their blood pressure. In fact, a lot of them would come and say, please recheck my pressure, have you checked my sugars, have you checked my other reports? And they just want to hear a little bit of assurance from you that everything's been okay and they don't have to worry about it. This is especially in elderly who live all alone, who don't have anyone to go back to and comfort them over there regarding this. So we call them the worried well. So yeah.
And that further highlights what we are trying to look at, how the mind can also affect the body. And it's not just a physical symptom, but how the mind affects it. And we are really looking at those different dimensions where, because you can mistake it so easily, we're asking, how does it enter into the realm of persistent conditions or psychiatric treatment that needs to intervene if the matter is really that serious? So maybe if you could throw light on some of these, not just symptoms, but psychiatric conditions which would help people to, first of all, distinguish and therefore to realize that it's time that they seek help.
Okay. I think Dr. Aishwarya mentioned a very important point about the elderly being anxious. So when you live on your own, you don't have a point of context. So you don't have anyone to say, actually, you look fine, don't worry about it, because that anxiety, often about dying, it's linked with, death, tends to build. Then that kind of spills into everything they do. So they don't want to go out in case they have a fall. Little things like this. So it becomes not only pervasive, but also affects their functionality. And that for us is the key element. When psychological, psychiatric issues affect your functionality and your outlook on life, then we know it's changing from what could be normal into what is a pathology with your mind. So anxiety is a big issue, because when you're anxious, your symptoms mimic cardiac problems. So you have palpitations, sweating, nausea, you have panic attacks, you can't breathe, you think you're going to die, but in fact it's anxiety. So that's when medication is important, therapy more so, to try and limit that anxiety, because when the elderly, who, even if they're not living alone, if they have a spouse with them, it bounces off each other. So the anxiety in the family is what we call, expressed emotions become very much higher, and it snowballs. So it's incredibly important that they come to you. And if you pick up on anxiety symptoms, panic attack, that kind of thing, it does need treating. Because that will just escalate. And that anxiety we've seen escalate into psychosis, because then the paranoia around what people are doing, what people are saying, how they manage to portray themselves, their symptoms, all of that becomes very intense because you have no outlet. And that's why we're going to talk a bit later about social contact and how important it is, and how as a community what we can do to minimize that. So anxiety is a big one. Depression we've spoken about. So depression will mimic dementia. We need to be careful about that. You have delusional disorders, which are very, very important. Again, very common with the elderly. And that links itself with depression, where you believe something has actually happened when it hasn't. But you hold so close to that thought and that belief that it becomes a delusion. So what is a delusion? A delusion is an idea you have that doesn't meet the reality of your circumstances or social circumstances or cultural circumstances, but you hold on to it very fixedly and you will not budge from it. So that's a delusion. So people live with delusions all the time. But with the elderly, again, if you're isolated and you're alone, those delusions become huge. Not easy to treat. Therapy, some antipsychotics, but that's another one we find very, very important with the elderly, because those delusions are often linked to health. So they will come to you and say, I have this pain, I have this issue, it definitely, you do all the gamut of tests and you find nothing, but they won't believe it. I know something's wrong with me. And that's when the psychs take over and, try and treat that.
Thank you for spelling out, because these are things that manifest more with age, and we're really wondering when there's intervention, and spelling out these dimensions of delusions, because the line between perception, which they believe is always reality, sometimes it is, but other times it's not.
Father Juvie, just to put a disclaimer that these psychiatric illnesses that I've mentioned are not only related to the elderly. Anyone from a very young person to a very old person can have those psychiatric illnesses. But in the context of this program, we're talking about the elderly.
Yeah, I think that's important to understand where it is coming and to whom it is going. While looking at these different dimensions, which has shown the effect of both the body and the mind and their relationship, sometimes this delusional aspect can also affect in so many different ways, not just the person, but those who are living with them, because they can confuse what they perceive as the reality. Sometimes they are the same, but sometimes they are absolutely not, and can even lead to cases of paranoia. And maybe if you could spell out a little more on this aspect, that will enable us to understand this question better.
As Angelica has just said, that pain is one of the most common signs of paranoia that I have come across. A lot of people come with just vague aches and pains, and you will be examining them from top to bottom, trying to figure out where the pain is, and they'll just point at a random point, and then you examine it and you're like, it's all fine, nothing is wrong, but they refuse to believe you. And then they'll be like, no, there is this pain. And then they keep on going to one doctor and the next, and it never gets better. And try different modes of therapy. Maybe if allopathy is not working, maybe Ayurveda. If Ayurveda is not working, maybe homeopathy. And it just never gets better even after all of this pain. And then finally it's just that doctors are not doing their jobs, or they're just very down, and it again leads to depression because of the constant pain. It may be a pain in their mind more than a pain in their body, but it's very difficult for them to accept that there is such a pain. There is no pain at all, in fact.
So what you've both been describing are really the challenges that a person goes through as they're aging, and in the whole gamut of experiences or illnesses that they are facing. But this has an impact not only on the aging person, but on their caregivers, because they have to deal with these situations, and not all of them may have a broader understanding of what's happening in these situations. So what would be, in your experience, some of the challenges that these caregivers face or have to address while living with an elderly person? Sometimes the caregiver could be a close family member, it could be the spouse, sometimes it's a paid professional, but these are issues that are important for those who are accompanying the elderly in situations like these.
There are patients who have had a stroke and are bedridden post the stroke. So the recovery takes a long time, and it takes a toll on not only the patient but also on the caregiver. Trying to get them to do their exercises, trying to motivate them to continue the physiotherapy that has been started already in the hospital is a very difficult task. So it's not only the patient that is having a difficult time, the caregiver is also finding it very difficult. And oftentimes they come back to us saying that we've tried as much as we can to make her do physiotherapy, but it's not working. It's also a very slow, long process, which it needs a lot of support from both sides. It's not only one side. From the patient also, they feel like before they could carry out all their normal activities, like at least going to the bathroom and cleaning themselves, having a wash without any support. Now they have to ask for help for every single little thing. So a lot of personal care is being taken over by somebody else. So washing themselves after in case they bedwet, that's another difficult issue for them. They've never had to depend on anybody else to take care of such things. So it's a learning experience for both the carer as well as the patient. So,
Well, you've taken us through all the struggles, not only of the elderly person, but the caregivers. Would you like to expand a little more on this as well?
Sure, Father Juvi. I think that's an extreme case where, caregivers are nursing their loved one, excuse me. But there are other situations where caregivers and the elderly person are physically well. They may have a few niggles, but the caregivers then are put in a position where they're caring for that elderly person and feel almost tied down to them. So, for example, I was speaking to a lady who's looking after her mother. The mother had a fall recently, and since then has lost confidence. So she's phoning this lady at work 3 or 4 times a day. Should I go out? Should I go for a walk? Should I not? Should I do this? Should I? So it kind of lends itself to a reaction where say, don't do anything, just sit down, watch television, don't do anything if you're so anxious about it. But then that feeds into not having a purpose in life. That feeds into feeling, well, I'm useless. She's told me to just sit and not do anything. So what am I supposed to do? And then you have situations where people have arthritis. There's a lady who has quite bad arthritis. And the minute she does something around the house, it flares up. And the daughter will come and say, but I told you not to do it. Why have you done it? And that leads to that friction where the parent wants to do something to feel, a sense of worth, to feel like she's contributing to the family. But that the carer then views that as another problem to worry about because of the pain or whatever. So it's a very, very intricate dynamic when you're a carer for the elderly, because in some ways you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. If you're too overprotective, you're taking away their autonomy. If you're not overprotective, it's like you don't care. If you want to get up, you get up. You want to eat, you eat. So how do you balance that? So carers are in a very, very tricky position. Sometimes with the best intention in the world and the best care that you make a statement or you put a plan in place, someone will come and see you, go out for a walk. I don't feel like doing it today. So then, you're left with having then to cancel arrangements. So it's very difficult. It's tricky because you don't know what mood they're going to wake up in. You don't know how they're going to interact. They don't know how they're going to react to your suggestions. And like I mentioned earlier, if sleep is a problem, they sleep later into the morning. So the whole day then is kind of delayed. So it is difficult. And that's where carers bring them to the doctor, say, right, she's complaining about this pain all the time. And you say there is no pain, there is no pathology as to why there is the pain. And they're left then with an elderly person saying, but I am in pain. So there are various issues, doctor's appointments, having to take time off work to take your parent or the elderly person to a doctor's appointment. That isn't easy. Making sure there's enough food in the house in the morning when you're leaving, there is a meal there. Making sure it's accessible. So people who have mobility problems, can they actually warm it up? Can they eat it? Is there somebody coming in to help? So it really is like a jigsaw puzzle. Their lives are like jigsaw puzzles where everything has to fit. The home help has to come at a certain time. Otherwise, mom can't have a bath. She can't have a bath. She won't have breakfast. Everything is there. And you're trying to live a life of going to work, coming back, looking after the children, homework, tuition, all of that. It's a lot. It's a lot. It takes an emotional toll. It also takes a physical toll on caregivers. And this is why later we're going to discuss how volunteers and church groups and other social groups could be such a boon. It's not all on them to motivate, to stimulate, to, ensure that they're getting the best possible psychosocial care.
Just listening to the unfolding of a personality as they're aging, and we've said it earlier too, some of it depends on the nature of the disease that has sometimes turned them into a person they were not.
True.
But on the other hand, you get people who've been irritable even in their younger days. And it just gets progressive as they grow older.
So, Father Juvi, that's a very good point. Premorbid personality is what we call it. That premorbid meaning what you were like when you were healthy, and then what you're like now after developing an illness. So if you've always been really an outgoing, extrovert, a social person, meeting people, going out, doing things, that sustains you through your later years. So you will find the motivation by your very personality to seek that social stimulation. But if you have been quite, not necessarily withdrawn, but you've been a more private person, and you can be a little bit cantankerous, which again is normal old age behavior, as opposed to being more anxious. All of that is exaggerated in your elder years and will become more exaggerated if you develop a mental illness. So you can have a person who's depressed, who's very withdrawn, not talking, not interacting, not caring for themselves. Or you can have someone who has an agitated depression, who's just ready for a fight all the time, is irritable, agitated. So it really, your pre-morbid personality is very important. That's a good point to raise.
And it's a good point for all of us who are watching, because we need to look now. This is not only for the elderly people, for everyone else. The manner that we choose to live, to behave, to act, we grow gracefully into it as we age. And I think that's important. We've looked at different aspects and dimensions of what this person, the elderly person, is going through, because that is the condition we've spoken about. But we also need to look at, insofar as we can, what preventative strategies can be followed. First of all, for the person who is aging, for those who are giving that care, whether it's the home, the family, and then the role of society, whether the church and other groups, so that it becomes a wholesome and a holistic approach to somebody going through that. And so maybe to spell it out for us, could you maybe speak a little bit about these preventative strategies?
Sure. So, Father Juvie, keeping your mind active is crucially important as you age. That is because the normal process of aging, you tend to lose brain cells, to put it in a layman's term. And even though when you do exercises for your mind, it doesn't regenerate the cells, it strengthens them. It strengthens our neuronal ties, if you like, in the brain. So challenging yourself is very important. So it could be crosswords, puzzles, jigsaw puzzles, Sudoku, things like that, which you are having to think about and think laterally as well. So then you're stimulating your brain cells. It's also very useful when you learn a new language, learn a musical instrument, because that is teaching your brain something completely new, which fires up the receptors to then strengthen the neuronal links. So these are things that people can do themselves. It doesn't have to be, very expensive equipment or books or whatever. If you write down 7 numbers, for example, from 1 to 10, and memorize it, the very fact that you have to memorize that, you've stimulated your brain. So, that's a very simple thing that you can do, and you can do it anywhere. Random 7 numbers, learn it forwards, learn it backwards, and see if your memory, how you stimulate that. It takes concentration, and concentration and memory are very closely linked. So if you don't concentrate on something, you won't remember it. So these brain games, as we call them, you have to concentrate, you have to focus, you have to use your mathematical ability, you have to use your language skills, and all of that then is stimulating your brain and pumping up, the neuronal kind of connections, which is very important to stay healthy, keep your mind healthy. There are other things you can do which are really important, is exercise. Physical exercise. As we know, physical exercise is not just about your body, it's about your mind as well. So making sure you can go for a walk every day, catching up with friends, go play a game of cards, go for a swim. Anything that you feel physically able to do is very important. If you feel you can't walk on the road, it's unsafe, walk up and down in your sitting room. You can do 15 minutes of to and fro, and that again is useful. So as an individual, we have responsibility to look after our health, whether it's physical health or mental health. make contact with family, make contact with friends. Quite often you become quite insular. And you think, well, I'm retired now, I have nothing to offer anybody, what am I going to talk about? And then if you're getting a little bit impatient, you think, phone so-and-so, and they're going to say the same things over again, so I can't be bothered. But just the act of phoning someone or someone phoning you, you're using your brain again. You see, and that keeps you mentally active. So physical health, mental health are very closely linked. Keep a good diet, because if you have a good diet, your physical health is good. If your physical health is good, you have less to worry about. So it's all interlinked. But I think that's what an individual can do for themselves. What the family and caregiver can do is to keep that social contact and that stimulation going. So it is very hard. It's a big challenge, because quite often the person you're looking after won't want to do it. So it's finding the strategy and working around their moods, around their pain, around whatever's going on, to have social contact with no amount of television, no amount of looking at your phone, any kind of technology can take the place of human contact. Human contact is very, very important. Sit down, have a chat with them, invite a neighbor in and say, look, I'm busy with the kids and homework and cooking. Will you sit with mom or dad or whoever for 15 minutes? You know, talk about the newspaper, talk about whatever, but it's another human being that you have contact with. So that's what families can do. They can organize going to church on a Sunday, meet up with someone. Maybe the person you're looking after can go for a coffee. You know, you drop them, you pick them up, whatever. But it's taking that extra effort, which is a big ask. It's a big ask for caregivers, because life as it is, you know, in this day and age is very, very exacting. So that's what the family can do. They can invite other members in to say, right, we are off to spend the day somewhere else. Would you mind, not babysitting, but just checking in? Which then helps with that dynamic. Well, you guys are going out, but I'm left at home. You know, that can lead to a lot of resentment. Unjustifiably sometimes, justifiably sometimes. It's very difficult to know the dynamic in a family. But this is how a caregiver can pull in resources to help with the elderly, help keep them stimulated, have that social contact. But I think on a wider scale, and this is something that hopefully will become more prevalent, is having church coffee mornings, where people who go to church anyway, they can walk to church, they can go in there. Maybe the parish priest can organize 10 people coming in, having a chat for half an hour, 1 hour, and then going back home again. It's something to look forward to. It's something to get up and get dressed and go out to. Otherwise, you can stay in your nightie all day. Who cares? No one sees you. And that's what leads to that gradual decline.
It's fascinating you've taken us through these various aspects that we can all fill in different other aspects as well. Maybe if you could speak a little bit on the aspect of nutrition that would help as a preventative strategy. Would you have something to share with that?
What I've noticed is a lot of the elderly are diabetic right now. So nutrition-wise, what has worked for a lot of my patients are small regular meals. So a lot of them say they don't feel hungry and they're not able to take a lot at a time. And so they kind of end up sometimes they end up waking up late, so skipping a meal. So then they develop gastritis, then they feel like they can't eat anymore. They don't feel hungry. So what I've noticed is every 2 to 3 hours, if they take a small amount of maybe fruits or maybe some veggies, it really helps them out. Maybe some nuts, things like that, which really just kind of fill them up for at least 2 to 3 hours, so that they don't have to take one heavy meal. Yeah, a big meal, which kind of makes them feel very uncomfortable and bloated. So,
as to put it another way, it's not only what you eat, but what eats you. Because we're really looking at it from the point of view of the mind as well. And you've raised other issues some take stuff for longevity, and you get as many WhatsApp forwards on that line. But we are more concerned of this relationship between the mind and the body, which both of you have spelled out. I also want to bring into this the element of spirit and spirituality, because today people use all sorts of words for it, mindfulness or meditation, and it can mean many things to many people. I'd like to speak about it particularly from the point of view of our faith and our spirituality, because we are all of a piece, body, mind, and spirit. We are not compartments, and each have their effect and throw their shadow one on the other. And so, how do we understand spirituality? How do we practice meditation? Now, you get a number of what they call mindfulness, which is great in itself because it keeps the body rested and relaxed. And I think many people practice it and practice it well. But when we understand Christian spirituality, it's not only about feeling good. It's about being in union with God, who's the source of life, who's the source of grace. The byproduct is you will feel good, but that's not the aim. And this connection that we have with God gives us what we call, in so many different phrases, grace, kripa, where God's strength comes beyond what we might measure physically or even matters of the mind. And therefore, a form of prayer or meditation, a simple rosary, a rhythmic prayer, brings calmness to people. I remember when my father was sick in hospital, he couldn't concentrate. The moment we prayed the rosary with him, he just gradually, and it was, I remember you saying in an earlier program, what goes in first is the last out. And so some of the prayers that we learned in our younger days now get a different meaning as we pray it in our older days. We have that experience. Sometimes we learn to meditate on the scriptures and how that word is a life-giving word. So we are looking holistically at these strategies to enable us to age well, and to age gracefully. And we cannot eliminate one at the cost of the other. They all go in together, whether, as you rightly put it, the physical dimension, whether it is the dimensions of the mind or the social dimension, and most of all, because all of us are rooted in God, the spiritual dimension. We've looked at different instances and situations, I think particularly of this 92-year-old woman who loves playing Scrabble and gets so impatient with the 1 hour who comes just before because they're taking their time over it. But I salute this woman who keeps her, as you said, the brain exercises going. I think of another person who on turning 65 made a pledge that every year I will learn a new hobby or a new skill, whether it was painting, learning a musical instrument, going for singing classes. And I think these are marvelous ways. Some have even, I remember Redemptorists at the age of 65 decided to learn Mandarin, working in the United States. And I jokingly said, you won't learn enough for this life or the next. But because his passion was for people, he had a motivation, he had a purpose. So I'm sure that, if we were to listen to some of your stories as you are listening in, you would have so many such stories, not only for yourself, but hopefully to inspire those around you in these matters that are so, so important so that we age gracefully. Now, we look into the areas of the person, of the caregivers, and we mentioned also the larger society or the church groups. Could you throw a little light of it, some of it from not just your knowledge, but also your first-hand experience?
So what is taking off these days in various parishes in the diocese is a befriender scheme, where you have people who might be recently retired or people who have the time to spare. They befriend an elderly person living alone, because I think in the Western world, things are slightly different, where people who are isolated and live on their own, they may not see another human or have contact with another human being for days on end. We're a little bit more blessed in India, I think, because you have a greater social contact here. So the befriender scheme is usually people of the parish who go and sit for 15 minutes, 20 minutes, 1 hour, whatever you can afford to spend, and just enrich someone's life that little bit more, maybe take them shopping if they can't go out on their own, or even just read a newspaper with them. It's about that social contact, it's about the human contact. So the Befriender scheme and volunteers from church is hugely important, and has made a big impact on people who either are housebound or don't have the support, family support, to take them out and do things with them, and just give them that little extra in their lives. So that is something we can think about. There are also a group of retired priests who visit the elderly. They gather 2 or 3 of the elderly if they can, and maybe say a prayer, say the rosary, something to give them a purpose, give them something to look forward to in the week. So if that happens even twice a week, they're 2 days that, they get that stimulation and get that contact and that happiness. So these are things that I wish would actually become more prevalent, because the aging population is increasing rapidly. I think thanks to medicine and technology and all the rest, people are living longer, but they're living more lonely lives. And I think that's what we need to focus on to try and change, because longevity is wonderful, but you need a quality of life.
And I think that's where you brought in the importance of intergenerational contact. So they're not living in certain isolated places, but we are going to move into, and that's why this Befriender scheme, I wish it gets more and more popular. It can be done on the level of your own building or neighborhood, or what we have are basic Christian communities that we have, but also irrespective of one's faith. Because all of us, no matter what your belief, you are going through the same gamut of experiences. And I think that would be something that is very important. In our Holy Redeemer Church here in Bangalore, they have a very specific program for elders, whether it is gathering together for just sharing, praying together, going on pilgrimages, or even picnics. And it takes a little organization. But that's where intergenerational contact helps. It doesn't have to be done only by them, but you make it easy for the others to participate. Because as you stressed, both of you at the very start, social contact is so crucial. It's not just contact, it's life-giving. And so all this really comes into play.
And it needs to be consistent, Father. Sorry to interrupt.
No,
it's not just once a month or, once a year or whatever. It needs to be consistent to be able to keep that brain stimulated and the social contact going.
And that's where the help of a calendar for the year helps. That we do it once a month at least. That there is a gathering of people, not just for World Elderly Day or Grandparents' Day, but you do something that's called tokenism, but something that becomes really a rhythm of life that's taking place. And that's why it's so important for those who are listening to at least be initiators of this in the places where you live, in the localities where you stay, in the parishes that you belong to, and write back to us and tell us what's happening, because this is part of a process that others will also benefit from, your initiatives that the rest of us will benefit also from.
Thank you, Dr. Aishwarya, for bringing up the subject of nutrition and diet. And you brought it out from your experience of diabetics. But there are many people out there who may not be diabetics, but are obviously struggling with diet-related issues. What would you have to say, advice to all of them as they get older?
As a person ages, their appetite also reduces. So they're unable to take in a lot more, as we would expect them to eat a lot more and try to force them to take in a lot more, but it's just not possible for them. So they prefer lighter meals, and maybe more frequent meals might help them. A more balanced meal with a good amount of carbohydrates, proteins, and fats is what would be the most useful for them. So maybe in each meal, if it's a light meal also, you can just add more protein to it by ways of maybe some little extra meat, soup. If you're giving them a soup, maybe a soup with more vegetables, more meat in them. Maybe a little a sandwich with added cheese, or anything that could increase their little protein intake, which will help them with their muscle mass also. So that would be more helpful. Carbohydrates in general, we kind of don't encourage too much of, but it's all needed. People take that to an extreme and just stop carbohydrates completely, which is again another problem because that is required for energy. So a good amount of carbohydrates, but at the same time, everything should be balanced. I think that really helps them out.
Thank you.
Just to add to that, Dr. Aishwarya, I think as you get elderly, your tastes change as well. So not having 3 main meals a day and not having the same food that you've eaten all your life is not an issue. Just to reiterate, as long as the meal is balanced, some people like a light meal, and there's no issue in that, but you need to make sure that it's healthy. You have a balanced meal, you have the protein, which is very important, but it also has to cater to your taste. Because as you get older, you get more fussy with what you eat, and you're more particular, and you want certain things, you don't want certain things. And again, this is where families struggle navigating that. But there isn't an issue in it as long as they are eating well, and I don't mean portion size, I mean quality. That shouldn't have an impact on either their physical health or their mental health.
I'd like to thank the panelists for giving us an insight of aging gracefully. I look at it from a dimension of a caretaker, and this is where it's so important. A caretaker not only needs to look at the aged and try to understand them, but also to grasp from them the experience that they have gone through life, to help us when we get there to look at life positively, to help ourselves and also to help the caretaker at that moment of time. And I guess as times have changed, there's so many changes where we live in in an era where I think we have seen A to Z almost, and I think it's important as a caretaker also to absorb positivity from the people who we care for. That helps in loving them more and also getting from them the love that they had for us in our younger days. I know having three elders in the house, my mom being at 94, she was a little difficult towards the end because she was so dependent. Even till 94, she stitched, she read her newspapers, she would do the crossword. She was so active. But 94.7, she got this attack of sciatica. And mom from young, as long as I remember, never indulged in medicine. She wasn't a prayerful person, but I think she was highly spiritual. Her spirituality hid in the very gift of her life, and that's what she would always see. Good health means God is smiling at me and smiling on me till the very end. And that inspired the doctor who looked after her, gave her tremendous amount of, he was a Hindu gentleman, but learned so much of Christianity just in that 1 month, looking after mom. And he says, you guys are different. And mom would always say, don't look at the holy picture. Look at the neighbor. Look at the person you're looking at. There you see God. She was that type of a person. And yes, having a mother like that, and even to her death, she was different. Father Edgar, a close friend of ours, she said, Father, when I pass away, when I pass on, I don't want to have a service in church. So that shook us all up. And then Father said, what do you want me to do? He says, no, Father, I want to have a prayer service in the house, because my house is the temple and I see God in my home. And for that, we had to get special permission to do all of that, but it all happened. And then, even before, when she kept good health, she had donated her body to St. John's for medical science, which we all have done in the family. So that opened up a lot of confusion when she passed on, and a lot of our friends asked, Julius, what's happening? And yeah, so looking back at it also gave me and everybody at home, Vani was her right hand, something to be positive of life and to know that God lives in us and through us. It's something I would like to give to young people, people tending to the aged. They are not a burden, they are a boon.
Juvi and Dr. Angeliqueka and Dr. Aishwarya, thank you so much for sharing everything. And we resonate with a lot of it. But I just wanted to talk about one thing. As we are all seniors now, and there are so many seniors watching, and as we're getting older, how can we think about being positive about where we are today and be grateful for what we have and go through this aging process, in a positive frame of mind?
It's a blessing to have reached the age that we have. Not just for ourselves, but for others. Because our life has its purpose and meaning, not just because I'm living in my universe, but I'm living connected. It's true that in this journey of life, sometimes the struggles have been painful, and we don't deny that. But in this journey of life, we also see the ability to look back at life and to also count one's blessings. And the blessings come not only from the positive events in life, but some of the struggles that we have overcome with God's grace. And that is been a learning experience also. For some, that lesson comes easy. For others, it's a struggle till the end. But I found particularly more than just being positive or positive attitude is to have an attitude of gratitude, the ability to count your blessings. Because a grateful person is a joyful person. And when you're joyful, you learn to look for ways to be grateful. The day we have lost our sense of gratitude, we become professional grumblers. Because we take things for granted. We expect it from others. And we don't look at it as wonderful. To use my mantra, all is gift, all is grace. And the more we get into that mindset, we will be able to see our blessings. Not only those things that enhance our life, but in those things that with God's grace we are able to overcome. And I think that is more than just positivity, it is grace.
From a psychological point of view, I think as you get older, with your physical ailments, because all of us are going to have something or the other, it's very difficult to be positive about the future because you see that there's only one way the progression of your health is going to go. And it's all very well, where we think, yes, we're blessed, we're alive, we've got so much to thank God for. But when you wake up in the morning and your joints are stiff and you're full of pain, it's hard to draw on that and be grateful. But I think keeping a positive frame of mind also is enhanced by what you can return and what you can give others and what your sense of usefulness. So even if you're in pain, if you can go out and visit somebody or make somebody's life a little bit better, a phone call, it gives you that context and that comparison, which is so crucial. Because when you see someone else who is suffering, when you visit someone who might be in their end stage of life, it gives you that inner strength where you can reflect and say, actually, yes, I don't have much to look forward to, but I'm in such a better place than someone else. So it's about getting out there and having a context, a comparison to say, a little thing I do is going to make someone's life better, and I still have the ability to do that. That will give you that sense of, yes, I can be positive. When you don't have that and you don't It's just the same old every day, the routine, the pain, the medication. You can't look beyond yourself. And that's what's important. Julius, thank you for sharing that with us. I think you've had quite a unique, enriching experience. But being a carer on a day-to-day basis can be very exhausting, physically and emotionally, and spiritually. I think there needs to be a wider kind of arena for carers to have time to get that support, that psychological support, the spiritual support, because most carers have their own lives in tandem with being a carer. So you have to look after children, husband, job, whatever, and have time for your parents or parents-in-law. And that can really be very challenging. So I think what would be nice is if we had carer forums, for example, where you can just come once a month or once in 2 months and just literally offload what you've been through. Because when you're going through physical exhaustion, caring for somebody, the littlest things they say or do can really be very difficult to cope with. They might have been alone all day. You've been working your feet off all day. You come home and you don't even have time to sit with me. And you're thinking, yes, I would love to sit with you, but I've got to see to the dinner, I've got to see the children, I've got to do this, I've got to do that. So that conflict, that rub comes into it. And that can quite often, unfortunately, lead to elder abuse, where you say, I'm not even going into the room because I know she'll start. So, they're sitting there on their own. It's go make sure she's eaten, and that's all that matters, The interaction, the social interaction, the love, all of that becomes very draining. It becomes another chore. And I think having carer forums, having the protective factor for the elderly and the carer, because I think the emotional abuse can go both ways, where you get some very difficult elderly people who can be quite demanding, quite bitter, make you feel quite guilty that you have a life. And I think they need that support. They need that kind of offloading space. They need the support because not everyone is blessed to have, elderly people in their lives who are a source of comfort, a source of support, teaching. And that's where it becomes very, very hard to have that persistent, consistent, loving, caregiving kind of routine. Because we're all human. We all get tired. We all get irritable. And especially if it's your own parents, you feel you can afford to be a little bit more irritable with them because they're your parents. But that then can cross a line quite easily. So yes, you were blessed. But for those who are out there who are struggling, I think having a caregivers forum would be ideal. Just somewhere where you can be yourself and talk about what you're going through. And Julius, just to wrap up on that point, I think when individual carers are becoming overwhelmed, reaching out to our support network within the church, going to see your parish priest. There are lay members of the church that can offer you that support, or seeking professional help like a counselor, just to be able to have some space for yourself where you get that support you need to rejuvenate and go back and complete your role as a carer. So those are suggestions that have helped in other people.
Stronger together. Your mind matters. And it has mattered in this entire episode. As we've looked at various aspects and dimensions, whether it was the isolation and loneliness, that not only affected that person, but also affected the climate in the house of those who live with them, the relationships in different ways. It manifests itself in some sicknesses, most of which are real, some of it are perceived, some of it that needs patient accompaniment, but sometimes needs medical intervention. We also looked at different preventative strategies that would enable us to address something that is so important, but not sufficiently spoken about or addressed. And that's why talk shows like these have their role and have their place. We looked at it from the terms of the physical exercises that are needed, the mind exercises, the role of the caregivers, the home members, the family, and also society and the church, the role that they can play. And having listened to us, I'm sure it has echoed with you. And this is not, I keep repeating, just a talk show. It's for you to say, what does this say to me and how can I make a difference? Because strong together, your mind matters. This program doesn't end with the switch of the flick of the switch, as we would say. But it continues in the way we process what we've heard and take it forward to others. And it's so important that all of us realize this and make an impact. I'd like to read for you from the book of Ecclesiastes, or sometimes known as the book of Kohelet. It's from the last chapter, chapter 12, verses 1 to 7. Listen to the powerful and wonderful way the images of aging come across in this text and how we have aged over the years. Remember your Creator in the days of your youth, before the days of trouble come, and the years draw near when you will say, I have no pleasure in them. Before the sun and the light and the moon and the stars are darkened, and the clouds return with the rain. In the day when the guards of the house tremble, and the strong men are bent, and the women who grind cease working because they are few, and those who look through the windows see dimly. When the doors on the street are shut, and the sound of the grinding is low, and one rises up at the sound of a bird, and all the daughters of song are brought low. When one is afraid of heights, and terrors are in the road, the almond tree blossoms, the grasshopper drags itself along, and desire fails, because all must go to the eternal home, and the mourners will go about the streets before the silver cord is snapped, and the golden bowl is broken, and the pitcher is broken at the fountain, and the wheel broken at the cistern, and the dust returns to the earth as it was, and the breath returns to God who gave it. The beauty is not only of life, but life after life. And therefore, our life is not in vain. We've served our purpose, as this text so beautifully says. In the years, we have made a difference. And even as we age and grow older, because of what we have been graced with through this, we now grace others. Some of them might say it, others might not. But in the eyes of God, it counts. And so even when the light is finally extinguished, it's not really the end, because you are taken into the embrace of God. Our life is not worthless. Our life is with meaning. And therefore, this entire conversation today was to point out to that, to elucidate it, and then hopefully move us to act on it. We are grateful particularly to our two wonderful doctors, Aishwarya and Angeliqueka. We are grateful to our wonderful panel of participants who have participated not only with their questions but with their body language to show that what we are talking is about life and about life that matters. And so it is so important that we who are listening to this program make sure that we like, that we share, and that we subscribe. And may what you have experienced through this program be something that you will in turn pass on to others, so that stronger together, your mind matters, because we want to age gracefully. And with these words, may we all experience the blessing of God Almighty, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Thank you once again, and may God bless us all.